Hello, everyone. This is JD Calderon, and this is Indy Comics Explained. And today I have a great guest. But before I bring him on, just want to let you know, please hit like, hit subscribe, share out the videos, let your friends, let your family know, let anyone who likes indie comics or just comics in general, let them know about this channel, and because it will definitely help me bring in more people and more creators onto this channel. So, without further ado, here's our guest, Wilson Ramos. So,
Hi, everybody.
all right, Wilson. So let's get right into it, man. Now, just so everybody knows, so there's complete and utter transparency, I have known Wilson forever.
Yeah.
Right?
It's been some time. Oh, back in the 1900s, I would say we've known each other going that far back.
Exactly. Wilson went to school with my wife. So we've known each other quite a bit of time. So just for transparency's sake, Wilson's a great guy, fantastic creator, done a lot of stuff, been a lot of places. And Wilson, let us know about yourself. What have you been doing in this comic world, and how you've been doing it?
Well, I guess we'll go back to the beginning with my comic book journey. I guess, like everybody else, I collected comics. I can't even tell you what was my first comic book because though most people do remember their first beer, their first car, their first comic book, and stuff like that, I don't remember my first comic only because there's always been comic books in my life. I had cousins who would have them. I do have like a vague memory of maybe my first comic I bought myself in a bodega in the Bronx. This is going back in the 70s. And it was a box of comic books. And I clearly remember buying a Batman book. Now, even though it was the 70s, the book could have been older. I went looking for it years later when I figured out what it could be, because the only memory I have of it is that it's a Batman book. Robin was in it, and he was a prisoner of Ra's al Ghul. So most likely it was a Neil Adams book. And when I was looking at what possibly are those books, I found that it was like, oh, those books are a lot earlier than when I would have bought them. But again, it was a box of comics in a bodega, so who knows how long they've been. And so what I find is that I believe I do know which book it is. I don't have the issue number yet, but the clue is basically that Batman went to go check to see how Robin was doing because he was a prisoner, and Batman like stuck a knife into the wood behind Robin for him to cut himself out. So it's like, okay, so that gives me enough to look for the book, and it's like, okay, so that might have been my first book that I bought, but I wasn't collecting back then. It was just, I read the book, tossed it, or whatever. My book that I clearly remember buying and kind of started me on my journey was Marvel Team-Ups. Marvel Team-Up Spider-Man with Moon Knight and Marvel Team-Up Spider-Man with Iron Man. And the reason why I bought those books is because in the 7th grade history class, I couldn't tell you the history teacher's name. I couldn't tell you the kids I was hanging out with, but they had comic books and Spider-Man had a black costume, and no one could tell me why or how he got it. So I got answers like, oh, Captain America gave it to him, or he got it from Doctor Strange. And it gave me this look into something. I was like, I need to find out why, because up till then, superheroes didn't change their costumes. They always had whatever they were wearing all that time. So I went looking for the books, and those are the first 2 books that I bought. And it was like, oh, this is interesting that, back then, they would be in the very little corner of the comic book, see whatever book. So when I was reading those Spider-Man team-ups, and he talked about the black costume, it's like, oh, I got it in Secret Wars. So I was like, see Secret Wars #8. So it's like, okay, I got to look for that book. Now, when these books were published, Secret Wars was only in about issue 4 or 5 or something like that. So I had to go look for the back issues, which wasn't easy because I just started my comic book reading. So I lived in New Rochelle at the time. And I had to go to maybe 4 different newsstands to find comic books. And basically, if you wanted to really collect books, you had to hit all the newsstands at a certain time because not everyone carried the same set of books. So that was like the start of my journey. It's like, I'm liking this, I'm going to buy more. But at the time, I was only buying G.I. Joes and Transformers because there's a tie-in. And then, so those books were just around and I had, and Star Wars, because again, there was something connected to something else. So it was like, oh, if I want more Star Wars, I read the comic books because there are no movies at the time. If I wanted more Transformers, I could watch the cartoon, but here's another medium to consume this stuff. So once I got into the Spider-Man books, it was like, it really got me wanting to read more. So I bought all the Spider-Man books at the time, which was Amazing Spider-Man, Peter Parker's Spider-Man, and Marvel Tales. So that gave me Silver Age stuff. And it was so different compared to the modern stuff at that time period that it was like I was getting like a little crash course on comic history. So, and then I would say Secret Wars is really the linchpin of it all, because that introduced me to all the other superheroes. So everyone who appeared on Secret Wars, my comic collection basically starts at Secret Wars, the crossover books to it, and then that basically made me a Marvel zombie, which I got all the Marvel books. And so, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th, and 10th was just all about buying comic books before even knowing a comic book shop existed. I didn't even know one of those existed until I went to high school. So that was my journey, in the sense of I'm consuming these books. I ran out of Marvel books. So what else is there? Well, there's DC. What's going on at DC? Crisis. So now here's an introduction to a whole nother universe. And eventually, as I mentioned, once I got to high school of Art and Design, down the street from it was Forbidden Planet. So that was like the real first comic book shop that I went to, that it was just amazing. Just here's this local place that had all the damn books, that I didn't have to go to every little bodega, every store here and there. So I basically had this love of comics, but no intention of doing anything in the book. I went to Art and Design for graphic design. I wanted to work in advertising. That was like my first love, was creating ads, paste mechanicals, all that type of stuff, and do the early computer stuff. So I got to learn a lot of that stuff. But I always had my interest in comics and reading comics, buying comics. Art and Design, I got to learn more about comics there than just my own reading, because I would say by the time I got to Art and Design is when I started to learn who the artists were in the books. Because at the time, even though I read the book from cover to cover, I never bothered to read the credits page. I don't know why, but it wasn't.
A quick question. Who was the first artist you started recognizing? Like, whose work you could just spot and then say, that's that guy. I like that guy. Who is that guy?
I was getting ready to get to that point. The very first artist, what it was is that when I was going to Art and Design, I was getting into graphic novels, picking those up. And one point I'm reading an Incredible Hulk and Sing book, that they had like a buddy cop movie type thing in this graphic novel.
I know this book.
And Bernie Wrightson. And I'm looking at the artwork, and something about it clicked. And it's like, this looks a lot like this other book. And it could very well be Spider-Man Hooky that he also did. I don't know if time periods are matching up, but I clearly remember looking at that Hulk and Sing book and going, this looks familiar. There's something about that art style. And that's when I started to identify, oh, it's this artist. But before that, it's like, oh, I prefer the Marvel Tales Spider-Man compared to the current Spider-Man, to find out that the Marvel Tales Spider-Man I was reading was John Romita Sr., who became like the biggest influence in my art style. And it was like, being a huge Spider-Man fan, I did everything I could to go get those Marvel Tales issues. Those were more easy to find and a lot less expensive than trying to put together the Marvel Amazing Spider-Man books. So as much as I respect Ditko and the work that he did in the Silver Age, I think for me, Spider-Man is John Romita Sr. And once those floodgates opened, it was like, okay, I need to get the books that he worked on. And then eventually I learned about Kirby and Colin and everyone else of the Silver Age, and appreciate the beautiful artwork that they did. And there was nothing wrong with the modern age of that time of the comics, but they were a little boring. This is right before McFarlane showed up. inject some good blood into Spider-Man. And even though John Romita Jr. was on and off Spider-Man, he went through a weird phase in the 80s, which I don't mind because
Mm-hmm.
that was part of his progression into that to the art style he has now. So I appreciate what he was doing, but the books were a little boring until McFarlane came in. And again, that was during my high school years, where it was like it was an amazing books. Part.
Mm-hmm.
So again, from art and design, it was like I wasn't going to do comic books. It was more of like that was the thing that I liked, the hobby that I enjoyed. But to me, I was all gun ho graphic design. I had all my friends I knew were getting ready to do comics, wanted to do comics, and the great thing about art and design was that each little clique that I hung out with was for so the heavy metal people because that was the music I liked. It was the cartooning people because of the comic book stuff, and then I had the draftmen and stuff like that. So the graphic design crew. So I had friends in all the little cliques because of the interest that I had in all the different things. But again, in the back of my mind was that I didn't know what was involved in comics art wise. So not to say I didn't have an interest. It's like I didn't think I was going to do it. And then I go to college. I go to Mercy College upstate in Dobbs Ferry, just because that was the college my mom went to, and she knew the ins and outs of how, because she had to pay for everything. She knew now to the financial aid and TAB and Pell and all that stuff that she was able to get into that school. They had a graphic design program, and even though there was a lot of, I won't say bad stuff that happened in that school. It's more of the school decided that the baseball team and football team that they didn't have needed a field more so than paying for like the arts and stuff like that. So after a few years of being there, we get the notice that we're canceling the art program. Would you like to change your major to something else? Like, we have a great veterinarian program. And it's like, that's not what I was there for. So during this time, it was getting to the point where it's like, school's going to be over soon. Not much was happening there. But in Dobbs Ferry, there was a comic book shop. So after school, I went to onto the main street, and there was a comic book shop that I hung out after school there. And because the college is like an hour and a half away by bus, I spent quite a few hours at the comic book shop because I was in no rush to go home. And like everybody, everyone's story is that I hung on in that comic book shop so long they started paying me, because again, it's one of those things where I knew the stuff, became really good friends with the owner, and at the same time, just hang out there talking to the customers, helping put away the books and stuff like that. So, and again, I knew when the books came in. At that time, they came in on Thursdays. I was there early, so I'm helping putting the books on the shelf so I can get the books. With the comic book shop itself, it was called Amazing Tales, and I worked for this guy named Rick Plummer. Now, Rick bought the comic book shop from Gary Guzzo, who's an important person to remember his name, because when I first went to the comic book shop, Gary owned the shop. I was talking to him about comics, and I said that I want to sell some of my books. And he was, okay, make a list, bring it in, and we'll take a look at them. So about a week goes by, and I'm making a list, and this is, I never had a list before, so I'm trying to use whatever the early Word programs were back then, type up, and because there was no comic book program, there wasn't anything like that made yet. So I'm typing this thing up over like a couple of days, this whole list of the books that I'm willing to let go. And about a week later, I come back. I go to the person who's working the shop at the time and say, "Oh, is Gary here? I want to give him the list." And say, "Oh yeah, leave the list. Come back next week. He'll take a look over it and what have you." So another week comes by. I come back, and there's all different people there. So Gary has to go to the shop in between to go Marvel Comics.
Interesting.
So I get to become friends with the new owner. He's not interested in buying my books because he just bought the comic book shop. And so it's a comic book shop, so I hang out there. And I'm not sure exactly how much time has gone by, But eventually, I would probably say about a year or so later, um, he's getting ready to sell the shop. And during this time, I'm getting ready to graduate from college. Um, Even though Gary sold the shop, he would come in now and again because Gary still lived in that town.
Right.
And so he would stop by, talk about Marvel stuff and what have you, whatever promotions was going on, because he ran the promotions department at Marvel.
Okay.
So he would come in, and during that time, there would be other people in the shop that would come in that we get to talk to, who eventually will be either working in comics or would become writers and stuff like that, where it's like kept in touch with these people. And so, so I'm getting ready to graduate from college. The guy is going to be selling the comic book shop. There's no reason for me to be up at Dobbs Ferry anymore. So, and there was a chance to sell it to a few people. And one of the people that he could have sold it to was the manager of the shop, who would have kept me on. But the new guy, I don't think he was, well, he obviously didn't keep me on. So I literally run into Gary at the shop, and he gives me his card and says, you're really good into comics and you have an art background. Why don't you come in for an internship? And I took the card, and in my mind, I was like, oh, he was just being nice. I took the card, I put it away, didn't do anything about it. And then find out the comic book shop is being sold. It's going to be sold to the different guy. And it was like, okay, I guess, this chapter is closed. College is over. I have a small part-time job in the city working for a toy store only on the weekends.
Oh, wow.
And so during my college years, I worked for the college as well, because even though I didn't have to worry about paying for college, they took payment and making me work. So I worked for the math department, school, worked at the comic book shop, and then on the weekend worked at the toy store.
Gotcha.
And so now that I'm losing the college, losing the comic book shop, and then I guess in a sense losing the town, because there's no reason for me to even be in the town. One of the evenings, I literally run into Gary in the street, and he's like, "Oh, so you heard about that? It's selling the shop to the other guy?" I was like, "Yeah." So he said, "Well, what are you going to do now?" I was like, "Well, I'll be graduating soon, and that's it." It's like, and he said, "I was serious about that internship program. Why come in to Marvel and do the internship program?" So the next day I went to the school, and it's like, "I have the ability to do this internship program. Can I do it?" And it's like, "Well, you have all your credits to graduate. So if you do it, we have no problem with you doing it, but you're just going to be getting extra credit." And it's like, "Yeah, but I'm going to be working at Marvel Comics, so I'm okay doing the extra credit."
Right.
Sure enough, I basically go to Marvel, and I didn't have to interview. It will be for Gary. So it basically, he just had to make sure that I would get the college credit, and and that started my working at Marvel Comics. So I had no intention to go there, but fate had other things for me. So basically, I did a internship with Marvel. I did two of them. I basically did the college credit one. I think it was like 3 months or something like that. And then Gary was able to figure out a way for me to get a summer internship program. And I also, and again, it was like how blessed and lucky I have been in my career is that I didn't go into the regular Marvel internship program.
No.
Other thing altogether. So when when one of the people found out that I was an intern, it's like, "But you didn't come to the program." Kind of had to interview me to make sure. It's like, "No, I'm getting college credit here and this and that." It's like, okay, that's fine. That's a different department. It's not editorial, so I guess you could stay. So for that summer, being that the college thing was over, they were able to figure out a way to get me a paid internship for a little while. And I think, and the joke was the funds came from that portion of the, let's say the president's neighbor's son needed to work for the summer. That's where the money came from. It was like that kind of a thing. So I didn't get paid a lot, but the fact that I was getting paid to be an intern at Marvel was amazing. And that was, I would say, the start of my career, because working for the conventions department, doing advertising stuff. So I was creating posters, I was designing flyers, um, help with the back then we had this Marvel booth, and it was beautiful. It was just this, it was like a mock-up of the X-Men's Danger Room. Had a giant globe in the center. I mean, I wish that we had pictures of it because we didn't.
Mhm.
And back then we didn't have. We had cameras, but we didn't have. So we took pictures of everything.
Mhm.
Pieces of the booth in different formats, and it was just this like wonderful thing that got taken down and then sent to city, and it had his own crew to build this thing and take it down, and it had his own warehouse and stuff like that. And
Now, how many conventions did they use that in?
uh, well, it was part of the Marvel Mega Tour,
Mm.
and one of the T-shirts that we designed had probably 13 cons on it. It was all the big ones. So San Diego, um, Chicago. These are the ones that I remember off the top of my head. And a lot of these cons don't. Well, their cons are all different now. They all eventually became Wizard World cons, and then it changed from that. So, and that was the thing. It was like we did a ton of conventions, so it went to all the major cities. That it was. I have to find a shirt because I know I still have at least have one of the. I think we designed 3 shirts, or at least 3 shirts were designed while I was there. And again, being part of the conventions department was one of the best things I ever got to do because my first comic convention, by the way, was as a Marvel employee because I never did a comic book convention before then. I heard about them, but it was like this big thing that, it was really something you had to save up to go to, and I had no idea how to get tickets and stuff like that. Because again, just a poor little Bronx boy had no idea how any of this stuff worked. And so once I was at Marvel, again, I've been flown out to California. Was my first convention. It was WonderCon, I believe.
Nice.
And that was my first, going to a con and seeing what it was like. And that was right before the Marvel Mega booth was made. So it was just a regular, everyday kind of booth that had it was a big square booth that all the stuff was kept in the inside of the booth. So it was like a big, just a giant square with a little door on the side that we go in, and then so all the posters are around this booth. Very similar to I would say how IDW has their booth, but not as tall and not as bright and colorful and all that. It was just a beige booth that had images on it, and then we gave out comics and stuff like that. So yeah, that was my first job, was doing convention stuff. I got to design posters. Even though I worked for Gary, there was a team of us, and I was really working for the art director since I was part of that thing. And then Heidi was the art director, and she taught me everything that I know about. Basically, I knew stuff from college, and it was cool because even though I learned the computer stuff in college, we were still doing everything by hand at Marvel. So it was all paste up mechanicals. And so I was like, oh, I know this stuff. I know how to work with Rubylith. I know how to put these things together. And she went on maternity leave, so I was doing a lot of the art stuff afterward. So she taught me a bunch of stuff, and then I just kept doing that. Because of the way we worked with having things at the booth, we were announcing the comics that were coming out. We gave like Wizard magazine, all the publications went through our department. So if they did, an Iron Man book is going to be coming out soon, they need artwork for it. I would be the one to run up to the editorial, go to like Neil Yantoff, and it's like, okay, we are doing an article. Wizard is doing an article for Iron Man. We need some art from whatever's coming up. So they would give us covers and whatever artwork was available. And then I would be the one to color them in, just so they had color images. And so I was basically coloring comics professionally in a way, but not really, because it was just part of that department. The only people that would see the artwork would be the people in the magazines.
Now, were you coloring digitally, or were you coloring, old school style?
Old school style. Okay, so this is the way we did it. We would get copies of whatever it was. Let's say an Iron Man cover, and it would be like most likely a Tom Morgan cover at the time. And I would color it in with markers, and we would take a photo of it and then send out slides of these photos to the magazines and newspapers. Gary would write up a press release, and then basically, here are the approved artwork to use. Here's the information and stuff like that. So I was coloring that way. Eventually, we moved on to color on the computer.
Okay.
And so I got to learn basically watch the progression from doing color guides to coloring it directly on the computer. And at that time, we were putting things onto like one cover, if we were lucky, would fit on a SideQuest disc. And that was all going on that disc, with that one cover.
Oh God, SideQuest.
Again, old media, because they weren't fitting on the floppy drives.
Yeah.
And again, I got to sit there and watch that transition and got to be a part of that. So we were doing things for back for Marvel Age became something like Marvel Premiere or something like that. We specialized on particular books. So Spider-Man Clone Wars was one of them. So we did this like huge book, and that's where my first comic credits was part of the publicity department. So you can find early books with me. That's how you can find my credits. Right. And of course, and again, I'm condensing years of stuff down because I'm trying to think about what it was 20 more years ago,
right?
Probably 30 years ago now, where what we were doing, and it was a lot of fun. Then, unfortunately, here's the thing: the year before I got there, I remember reading in Marvel Age about the Marvel Christmas party. And they did this whole spread, and they had pictures of everybody at the party, and it's like, damn, that would be something I would love to be at. And a year later, I was at that party. And it was amazing. The comic industry was fascinating to be a part of, because here, during the conventions, I got to meet all the DC people. And there was no rival of Marvel versus DC. They may have been on paper, publicity-wise, but everyone knew each other. So we were going to lunch and dinners during the cons with DC people. And I made a lot of friends that way. And it's like the comic industry is tiny. And I don't think people realize how tiny the industry is, that we all know each other. And when you go to conventions, you're just dealing with the same people at the same shows, that you can't help but have to become friends with them, because these are the people you're seeing all the time. These are the people who kind of know what you've gone through, so you can have a conversation with them about how the con went and stuff like that. So to me, it was an amazing time to be at Marvel. It was like we showed up just after a huge party that happened. Even though the Image guys went off and did what they're doing and stuff like that, it was still a huge, great, big party. We just didn't know that the cops are outside getting ready to knock in the door and party, which is coming up to basically at the time would be the major layoffs that were going to happen.
Now, let me, as we're going to get into this, I'm curious, did this happen during the whole time when they purchased the, it was a distributor out in Long Island they purchased?
This is before, just
before that?
I'm trying to think which department I was working for when that happened. This was, okay, if I remember correctly, I was still with the conventions department when they attempted to buy Heroes World.
Heroes World, yeah.
So another department sent out their press release. How it went incorrectly? Because it didn't go through us. So this department decided to send out their press release, which is, it's what they did. The thing is that in the press release that they sent out, it was something to the effect of, by now you have heard we purchased Heroes World. Before it was actually announced that Heroes World was purchased. Now, let me put the caveat to, I'm trying to remember something that happened so many years ago that I only heard about, I wasn't a part of. So I would like to premise that, as the legend goes, that this went out beforehand, and because of that, it gave enough time for DC to do whatever their maneuvers were, whatever the other 3 distributors that were out there would do, and I do not know the ins and out of it.
Right.
In this aspect, I just know that started the domino effect of the downfall of distribution and the rise of Diamond.
Right.
I wish I knew more, but again, that was the thing. It wasn't part of my department. I wasn't sure what was going on. Marvel was in a buying spree at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Fleer,
Right.
Skybox, and I think this is all again Drew Revlon doing it.
Right.
And they bought probably arguably the wrong distribution company. Not knowing the ins and outs, I was excited that they were going to buy a distributor, because in my mind, in my innocent, stupid mind, I was thinking that means we're going to get all the comic books for free.
Right.
Because at the time, they were this thing where we got free Marvel comic books. We also got free DC comic books.
Nice.
You had to get on what was called the comp list. I was on the comp list. So I got free Marvels, I got free DCs. At the time, Jimmy Palmiotti and Joe Quesada launched their book Ash.
Right.
They sent free copies of the books to us.
Nice.
And we got some Archie books and some Image books. So everyone was, again, out on the outside. Here's some trade secrets. We're all friends. We all knew each other. We're trading books with each other. But outside, we're Marvel versus DC and what have you.
Right.
And again, they're printing so many books at that time. And another secret, there was no loss in money, because when you print comics and you're printing 5,000 copies or more at that time, the printer's going to give you like 6,000 in case a bunch of them get damaged.
Right.
So there's no extra money being sent. So when they were giving, and the only reason why I'm stating this is because what's going to happen later at Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
So so they're buying these companies, and things are not working out. Basically, from what I understand, or from what I was told, Heroes World didn't really have the distribution network set up the way they should have. They bought, and again, as the legend goes, they bought a small operation that was not going to handle the concept Marvel had.
Yeah. And
with that press release going out early, the other distributors closed up. Diamond did what they had to do, with either buy those distributors or watch the rest of the comic industry fall.
Yep.
Whether it would happen or not, I don't know. But he stepped up and bought it, and he could have made probably more money by not buying them. But at the same time, I think it probably would have been something that could have destroyed the comic industry. So that was, in a sense, the rise of Diamond from where I was standing, without knowing the information. While all this stuff is going on, I'm just, in my little bubble of, well, we're working for the promotions department. We're doing really cool stuff. We're talking to Wizard Magazine, trying to argue with them. Why do they have to put, every time they talk about the Spider Clone saga, they put an UGG after each of the words? It's like, but that's what they were at the time. It was, you look back on it now, and it's like, good or bad, that was what we were dealing with. We got to talk to CBG about stuff. I got to do a bunch of their covers by basically, they would want Thor on the cover, so I got to color Thor in that hideous costume he had at that time, which was like an S&M costume.
Now, just to let everybody know, CBG stands for Comic Buyer's Guide. This was, at the time, where you got your news every week. This thing came out weekly. It was a newspaper. A lot of people subscribe to it. You can pick it up at comic shops, but most people got it. They just got a subscription. Be delivered right to you. It's not like today where we get our news every day on these websites. Pick one. There's a dozen of them. So just to be clear, so people know, we're old.
Right. Anyway, there were so many magazines back then that we dealt with. It was Wizard Magazine, Heroes Magazine, CBG, Comics Buyer's Guide, Book Overstreet, which was a yearly publication,
Mhm.
Comic Book News, Comic Scene,
Yep.
which was published by the guys from Starlog,
Starlog.
and they were down the street from Marvel. So what was cool is I got to deliver press releases and that to them. So I got to, again, comic books opened a whole world to me, where it's like I got to see how other offices work and stuff like that. And and again, it was like one of those things that these are all things that were going on. The internet was new, and we put out the first internet comic book, which was, I believe, Generation X.
Wow.
Or Ghost Rider 2099.
Okay.
They both were, again, all these years are merging within the same.
Right.
So we were and to upload a comic book took 24 hours to upload Generation X to be able to be seen on the web.
Wow.
I got to do a little bit of the AOL chat rooms at the time for Marvel.
Mhm.
And again, it's just to see the beginnings of all these things. Disney Afternoon was also another magazine that we sent stuff to.
Mhm.
And again, I got to sit down in so many meetings to watch what was going on in the creation of comic books and advertisement stuff. There was a radio show that we worked on where basically Gary would do announcements for what's new in Marvel this week.
Right.
And he would have guest stars, and Tom Morgan was working on Iron Man at the time, and he did like a little bit of a reading of one of the chapters, and so he was doing the voice of Tony Stark, and then going into doing the voice of the Mandarin and all this stuff for this radio show that existed to just give information of what's new this week in comics.
Cool.
And so it was like being able to see that type of stuff. So I was in my element. It was advertisement. So I got to design posters. Back then, Alex Ross had just started doing Marvels, and it was up quite well. So I got to design a poster for the gallery. Now back then, there was the gallery called the 4-Color Gallery, where it was the only gallery in New York that featured original comic book art. So I got to design the poster for that, and so we're at the gallery, and again, this is all new for everybody. You know, Alex is just starting out, and it's like I could have bought pages of Alex Ross Marvels for like $300. Wow, page. At that time, I thought that was a lot of money. But it's like I was making money, I could have bought it, and well, I don't own any of that art. You know, hindsight being 2020 and all. But again, for me, it was like that was a wonderful place to be at. I got to meet everybody and talk to everybody because we were at the con. I got to be the guy who sat next to Stan Lee to make sure that you could only bring up one comic book for him to sign because people would bring their whole collection.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to watch Stan work because he had a story for everyone that got to meet him. Nice. So I was the one that's like, take your book out. Where do you want it signed, the cover or inside? Have it open that page. And then I would hand the book to Stan. He would sign it and talk to the person. And he always had a story for everybody. So even though the line was moving quickly, we had to, he made sure everyone felt like they got a minute with him. And they left smiling. And it was like one of those things, like that was one of the most fun things to do. Because here I am standing next to the legend and, you know, him talking to me and stuff like that. And at one point on this particular one, it was San Diego Comic-Con, and I had to cap the line because it's not, you know, it would go a mile long. So I had to stand where he was and go cap the line. While I'm capping the line, all of a sudden a big rush of people. And I'm like, oh my God, we're invading Stan. And then the rush disappears. And I go and I sit down next to Stan. And it's like, so what happened? And it was like, oh, yeah, that actor, Claude Van Damme, I think he is, the martial artist. He came by and he wanted to see if he could play Daredevil. And, and Stan's like, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. The accent. So it was like those little things that was like amazing for me because I got to meet so many people because of being in that department. I got to party with members of KISS because we were doing what was called Marvel Music at the time.
Mhm.
And I got to design or help design for parties. And it basically the invitation had something like "kiss my ass if you think you're going to get into this party without this invitation."
Mhm.
And so we had a party at a bar called Polyesters, the '70s bar, or '70s themes bar that has a giant mouth, Gene Simmons' mouth and head, as this ramp you could go through.
Mhm.
And so it was cool that I got to party with Gene Simmons and Ace Frehley from Kiss. And not really party, we were just in the same room, to be honest with you. But there's a picture with me and Gene that I have that was like a fun thing to do because again, it was always going to the cons, working really hard during the cons, but then having that time off in the evening to just be partying and drinking with all your comic book friends and all the comic creators. And I got to meet so many people there that it actually helped me out later because when finally the layoffs were happening, there was a group of people that were laid off. Different departments. Marvel used to have offices on the second floor, the fourth floor, the 10th, 11th, and 12th floor, and a penthouse in this one building at the 387 Park Avenue South location. And so all of a sudden they start consolidating the building itself. The a lot of people were getting fired, and eventually it seemed like it was stopping and slowing down. So it's like, okay, what do we do now? Well, we have to gear up for the next set of conventions. This was going on, and I clearly remember there was one day we had a staff meeting. We went to lunch, and it was like we were talking. It's like, well, luckily, I guess it's over because who's left to fire, and quietness that went above through us all, and was like, okay. And little did we know, a few weeks later, our department wasn't supposed to be fired, but the bosses of the boss or whatever who was trying to save his own ass,
Right.
we got rid of the department.
Mm.
And eventually, and again, he's not an important person because I don't even remember his name. He didn't last there too long. And so now we're all pretty much out of a job, and with the whole convention department. And for me, it was basically, well, what that was cool, that was fun. What do I do now? And back then, even though we were fired, we were still able to go back and visit the people we worked with.
Mm.
Happened to go back for some reason or another, and one of the departments that was not conventions department, but was on the same floor, handled like the how we get previews in Diamond.
Right.
There used to be like a Marvel owned section.
Okay.
And they had their own kind of magazine.
Mm-hmm.
That department was like, well, you were an intern. You technically weren't fired. You might still be able to work with us. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, come back next week. We might have stuff for you. I come back next week, and then I'm told, you know what? You were fired. So it was like I was fired twice in the same month. But they were, again, being lucky and blessed. There were people looking out for me, and I was told, there is an opening in an editorial. There's a, what did they call it at the time? They called it an entry-level position. And if you want that, we can have you interview for it. It was like, you're not giving you the job. You have to interview for it. So it was for editorial, which is on the 10th floor. We were on the 9th floor. I got to meet with the head of the department, which was Holly Rianda. She was the freelance liaison. Her job was basically to make sure the freelancers got what they needed for whatever it was. Like, let's say Marvel was doing a new set of T-shirts. She'd make sure those freelancers got that artwork. They would get the T-shirts. They would get the items that was used of their artwork.
Gotcha.
So anytime a pin was made or stuff like that, they would get that. She also handled.
You mean I'm sorry. You mean all the stuff Todd McFarlane complained he didn't get?
Yes. So whether she was hired to fix that problem, because this is what after Todd,
Mm-hmm.
these things are going on. She did a whole lot more stuff, but she was mainly working with the freelancers. She also ran, because of her job, she also was overhead of the art returns department.
Mm.
Art returns department was what it sounds like. It was the return of the original artwork back to the art after the comic books were printed. So I was told on a Thursday, the last day of interview is on a Friday. Come in on Friday, bring your resume, and you can have the interview. So that night, I'm typing up my resume on a computer. On a typewriter.
Mm.
Correction ribbon has ran out.
Mm.
So now I have to type this thing up in one shot, type of thing.
Mm.
Also, during this time, as I mentioned before, I was working in the toy store on the weekends. So I was doing Marvel during the week, toy store on the weekend. So that was why I wasn't too worried about leaving Marvel, because I still kind of had a job if it was weekends. So I interview the next day on the Friday. I'm the last person to be interviewed for this job.
Mm.
And because I worked at the toy store, I dealt and handled money.
Okay.
And that was the plus that I had in my favor, that if I'm not stealing money from a store, I'm not going to be stealing the artwork. The art returns department, I did not know at the time, had a sorted career before I showed up. And didn't really know about the stuff that happened with Marvel and artwork and artists. These are all things I've learned a little bit at a time in the magazines and stuff like that. But I didn't really pay attention to it. I knew a little bit about what happened with Jack Kirby while I was in high school, because there were articles out then. I was reading them. I didn't know about them, so I had no idea. So for me, while there, I'm interviewing. To me, it's like, is a job in editorial is a way in, entry level job. Fine, I'll do that. But I didn't know how many people were behind me requesting that, yeah, he should be doing this. Now, again, it was her decision that she made. The plus to me was really the money issue. And it was like, okay, we'll try you out and see how you do. Now, the person who did the art returns before me, Ruth De Hoya, she did a wonderful job in organizing everything.
Awesome.
The thing she didn't do is that she wasn't an avid reader. I was already reading Marvel books for 15 years by this point. I think it was about 15 years. So, and by then I was studying the art of comics and stuff like that. So she had piles of pages that would be on the side, because Marvel would do something called, if you had to change the artwork, make it bigger, make it small, it was a stat machine was used. That is basically a very fancy copier that was copied on a photo paper. And so anything that had to be changed was put on that stat paper. So that stat paper would go to the printers. That was the original art, basically. But the actual original art would be put to the side. So when the artwork would come back from the printers and go to the editors and the artwork would be brought, sometimes that one page wouldn't be with that artwork. It would show up later. So you had a pile of these one-pagers that there was no real way to identify them. But me looking at everything and reading everything, I was like, oh, that's from Web of Spider-Man. This is from that. I can basically go in and start finding places for these books. And since we had the Marvel Library, was the office right behind my own, I was able to go in and say, can I look at the Web of Spider-Man books that you have? And then be able to track things down. So being that I was a fan for so many years, and I had the art eye, I'm able to look at it and go, oh, okay, this is from this is from that. And I got to really learn how to be able, at the time, I can't do it now, it's been so long, I could look at a piece of artwork and tell you not only who penciled it, but who inked it by the brush line that they use, or the pen line that they use, or little things here and there that you know that, oh, this is Dan Green inking, or this is Al Vey's inking. And it was all these things that I learned while being there. And art returns was basically the job that, I basically created my career at Marvel from, because I stayed there in that department, which was an entry-level department, for the next 10 years. Okay. So that was from 2004 Sorry, that was from 1994 to 2004. Was
Right.
basically me working in that department. So I got to see all the things of the various Marvel layoffs and then Marvel going into bankruptcy. And being that I was the only one left in the convention department, I still got to go and do work with the new convention department. Because at Marvel, you didn't really get promotions. What you got was, would you mind doing this job too?
They just shifted you around.
And it's like, even though I did art returns, that was my main job. I
Mm.
consulted with the conventions department that they were using, so I still got to go to some conventions. And yeah, for 10 straight years, I went to every single San Diego Comic Con
Mm.
as part of that. And with art returns, as I mentioned, this is now 10 years of me doing kind of the same thing every day. Art comes in, art goes out. Um, that made me have the ability to meet every single Marvel comic book artist who was working there at the time
Mm.
and afterwards. And that was probably one of the best jobs I ever had, is because I got to really be in my element, talk to every artist, and that's where I was decided to really look into making comic books, making my own
Mm.
drawing comic books. I was already by that time a colorist for Marvel. My first official coloring job was a pinup in Ghost Rider 2099 issue 25. It was a pinup, and the way I got that job was that all the editorial knew that I colored because of the work that I was doing with the conventions department, and I was coloring their books already, or their covers. And I had made a portfolio and I gave it to all the editors. And the downside is like, oh, he's that guy down the hall in that office. And that's what they
Right.
see me as. They don't see me as a freelancer.
Mm.
But being that I'm working at Marvel and it's a Friday and it's after hours, I had an editor, Joe Andriani, walk up,
Mm.
knock on my door and says, would you like to color something? I was like, yeah, what do you have? And I have this pinup. It's for Ghost Rider 2099. It's the last issue. Would you mind coloring a pinup? Sure. So that was my first published work, and my name is nowhere in that book at all because it's the last issue. But that got me a lot of coloring work because I was usually around after hours.
Mm.
And a Friday, basically, here's some work. Take it home over the weekend, color it, come back, and here it is. And so I got to be the guy who would be coloring 3 pages here, 4 pages there to make sure the book got out on time. And in one case, I colored a whole Juggernaut book, Juggernaut #1 shot, 48
Mm.
book because FedEx lost the color guide.
Oof.
So
Wow.
I had the weekend to color 48 pages. And again, not on the computer, color guide.
Mm.
Markers. I got the Dark Martin inks and basically doing it. And I love doing that because Spider-Man was in that book. And as I mentioned before, Spider-Man was my favorite character. So I would do that one shot. And I also did a lot of cancel books. Usually the last issue of a bunch of cancel books. So
Gotcha.
Marvel Generations, there was a 12-issue miniseries. So I did like the last
Mm.
Spider-Woman, which was canceled. So it was like I was working on all these canceled books, and they canceled a lot of books. So that got me more to the mindset of, yeah, you know what, I could probably do this freelance stuff because it was easy in the sense of I had a stable job, but I got to be creative. And then at the time, while I was working at Marvel, I get a call from a buddy of mine who as I mentioned before, there was a bunch of people at the comic book shop who would eventually work in comics. One of them was Tom Dougherty, which you know from Committed Comics. So
Gotcha.
he started Committed Comics, and he had called me up, and it's like, hey, do you want to do some comics with us? I said, well, what do you want to do? It's like, do you have a creator-owned project? And I had started working on something while I was an intern because as an intern, you get a lot of downtime. And Kruger, who worked in the publicity department, he was working on Marvel's that catalog that I was talking about before.
Right.
He did his book called Foot Soldiers.
Yep.
Now he's able to publish Foot Soldiers through Image because he
Mhm.
was able to show it to Marvel first. Marvel passed on it, and in the rules of Marvel, you can work on your own project if, and again, this is at that time. Don't know if any of that's true now, but as the
Right.
rules, if you show it, shop it around to Marvel first. If no one bites
Mhm.
on it, you're allowed to shop it around for other people. So that gave me my idea of, oh, we could work on our own stuff. Let me get started on working on something.
Right.
And that was the genesis of what would eventually become Team Kaiju,
Mhm.
which was going to be published through Committed
Right.
at the time. So um, Committed was in its infancy. So I was there more as like their art director and looking at the
Okay.
projects they were working on. So even though
Mhm.
I had my own project, they had projects as well. And I got to do a few conventions under their banner. The very
Mhm.
first convention I got to do with them is what was called the Old Timey Classic Show, if I'm saying that correct, in Westchester, New York. Um, and it was this. It wasn't an official convention space. It was a. I mean,
It was
well,
like a.
it still is. It's the Westchester. I think it is called the Westchester Convention Center, but
Mhm.
we're in like a giant gym because they have basketball arenas there and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I got to do that was like my first convention I got to do not as a Marvel employee but as a creator.
Mhm.
It was pretty cool. So there was a bunch of us. It's even though I met Eric, or so they tell me I met Eric before then, and who I'm talking about is Eric Rivera. Either I met him at that show or right before that show. But that's kind of where we were talking, and he was like, "Oh, I know you're working on that Team Kaiju book. If you ever need any help," and he's a writer, "if you ever need any,
Mhm.
let me know." I said, "Oh no, I got it. Because again, me thinking I could do everything,
Mhm.
um, was working on this thing and trying to put it together and doing artwork and stuff like that, and being lucky and blessed that I worked at Marvel, that I was able to talk to Marvel artists and say, "Hey, would you mind doing a pinup of this character?"
Right.
So I was starting to collect more so, not really working on the book, but more so of like, it is cool that I could buy a piece of artwork from an artist, and I have,
Mhm.
but to be able to have that artist draw my own character, to me, was even something more special. So,
Mhm.
and I got people like John Romita Sr. to do a sketch of my character. It's like having one
Nice.
of the Beatles sing a song you wrote.
Right.
He had no reason to draw it for me, but he did. And so with Committed, part time doing stuff for them and looking at their books and working with them. Um, the mistake was I was trying to fix all their books and never really work on my own. So that's basically why we never really published with them, is because
Mhm.
it got to the point where it's like I'm working on everybody else's book, but not my own. There
Right.
was a structure change with Committed, and it was one of those things where it's like, I don't know if I want to be part of that. Because again, all this time that I was doing work with them, and no fault through their own, I wasn't getting paid for any of these projects. So I was doing
Mhm.
a ton of work for them, still working at Marvel, trying to work on my own book, still working at the toy store on the weekend because, again, I'm a glutton for punishment. And so, not knowing wherever, I may have a job, not really have a job. I got fired from Marvel twice before I actually got a real job at Marvel.
Mhm.
You never know what's going to be around the bend. And again, I'm condensing 10 years at Marvel all at the same time. So
Right.
that was my step into indie publishing, was
Mhm.
stuff with Committed, putting out books with them, um, going to like, because they had a great mentality about using um, big name artists on their covers. So you would have like Dick Ayers do a cover, but the
Nice.
interiors will have new guys coming in, so they get a chance to be in a book with a comic legend. And
Mhm.
at the same time, a comic legend gets to work on a project he's known for, which is westerns. But at the same time, get to do something indie, get work because he wasn't getting work anywhere else. So
Mhm.
it was one of those things where here's a platform where you can have different generations of artists working on projects. and that project was called Threads. And I designed the logo for that. I probably lettered the whole thing, colored the whole thing. Not colored, great scaled it because it's black and white. Because as you know, printing like
Yes.
a lot less expensive. But that was my step into independent comic creations. And again, at the same time, doing whatever work I was doing for Marvel. Mostly when I was working on Team Kaiju, it was basically trying to create that first book. I spent more time collecting pinups by other artists when I should have been paying more attention to my book. And then having that conversation with Eric again about, here's what I wrote. What can take this mess and do something about it? One of the things we joke about, and I might have told you this story, but one of the things that I realized was that as an artist, there are some things that I think are really cool. And one of the issues was that I spent 22 pages with the character putting on her costume and thinking to herself, why does she do this? Eric was able to help me condense that to 2 pages. And make a book that artistically I thought would be interesting. But looking back on it, it's like, why did I think of even doing that? So it was like having him come in and basically go, here's what you should do. And it made it where it's like, okay, I think this is something I could possibly do. Right. Going back to Marvel with the don't get a promotion, you inherit jobs. So the Marvel bankruptcy came and it hit Marvel hard. Fast. There was so many people let go. We were just, miserable going to work, scared to talk, because every time the phone rang, you did not know if that was basically the call to come down to pack your bags. Right. So during that time, I inherited, and by inheriting, it was like, would you mind holding on to this key? And it was the key to the library. So I went for, if someone needs to get into the library, you can let them in. Which led to, by the way, we got all these new books that needs to be bounded. Would you mind making sure that gets done? Would you mind? So now I control the library and the art returns department. No extra pay. The few times that I try to get out, and by getting out means that it was an opening in one of the other departments, and I tried to interview for it. It's like, no, someone else got it. That's fine. I try to get into editorial. I mean, I was in editorial, but I interviewed a few times to try to get to become an assistant editor. And there was a bunch of things going on where it's like, we kind of need you in the department that you're in. I took an entry-level job and I kind of made it my career because I fixed a lot of things that happened. Right. And it wasn't my job, but as an artist, I would want my artwork back. There was a blood stain that Marvel had created from the time they were timely till then, that people did not get the artwork they were supposed to. I kind of made it my mission to fix that. And finding out information about what happened with the artwork, what happened at the warehouse, what happened about people stealing. And there was so many legends. And through my investigation, I call it a lack of a better term, all those things that were talked about was both true and not true. There's a little bit of truth in every one of those stories, and then a lot of that stuff didn't happen. Right. And so it's really hard to figure out what to focus on, other than I did the best that I could. I returned more original artwork than any other person that had the job before me. And a lot of great people who had the job before me. So Dan Slott had the job before me, on to write Spider-Man. Right. So in my mind, I'll eventually be working on Spider-Man. And this is how cocky I was back then. At the time, Spider-Man 400 had hit, and I went to Ralph Macchio's office, and I was like, it only took this many years to get to Spider-Man 400. I would say by Spider-Man 600, I'm going to be drawing that issue.
Hmm.
And I think by Spider-Man 600 there was a Ramos on the book, but it wasn't me.
It wasn't you. Got you.
Most likely it was Humberto. Um,
Mm.
the so trying to figure out how to fix art returns was basically one of the things that I tried to do. Find artwork that was like in the warehouse, finding artwork that was like sitting in the wrong places. Basically, there was a box in my office that had it was a big box that the person before me told me, I don't know what that box is. That's been here when I got here. You don't have to worry about it. And
Mm.
it took about 2, 3 months where I was like, okay, this is my job. This is my office. I'm going to see what's in that box.
Mm.
On the box says 1 of 7,
Okay.
or 7 of yeah, it's like 1 of 7. Yeah, because 7 of 9 is a Voyager character. It was
Mm.
box marked 1 of 7, and I open it up, and in the boxes are brown envelopes that has the Marvel address to their Empire State Building address.
Mm.
So that means Marvel hasn't been in that on that address since the 1950s.
Wow.
Sure enough, in this box that's addressed that in this box are these envelopes addressed to Stan,
Hmm.
the Marvel Comics office, and they're from whoever was doing the printing at the time. Open
Gotcha.
it up, and his original artwork going back to the 1950s.
Wow.
That's just been sitting there. And
Mm.
box 1 of 7. So where are the other 6 boxes? It's not going to be until 25 years later where I find out about those other boxes.
Mm.
And so, sure enough, there were Marvel Romance comics, stuff for Gene Colan, a ton of the Marvel artists who were working on those romance books.
Hmm.
And so it was a pleasure to be able to return that stuff that was there. I think there was one Jack Kirby page that was actually laid out by Jack and then inked by another artist. And
Hmm.
everything else in there was just like all these things that was like, okay, it wasn't stolen. It was just put away in a box and never looked at.
Right.
Um, the stories about the warehouse, yes, there was a room where all the artwork was just being tossed into.
Mm.
And so someone who had the job again before me, and there was plenty of people who had the job before me. Nell Yomtoff, I believe, had it. Bob Harris, who was the editor in chief at the time, had my job, and
Hmm.
tons of people, and they all did what they could. And I would hear bits and pieces of stories, and it's like, okay, so it was one point they would be tossed into this warehouse, into this one office that it was just tossed in where you couldn't even get the office door open, and then
Wow.
we decided we got to clean this up, and that's where
Hmm.
the cleanup started. At the time, I didn't know Jim Shooter, but I did hear the stories about how he went in and helped clean up. And
Hmm.
it isn't until he on his blog, he writes a bunch of stories about what happened during that time, and he talked about these boxes of books. I mean, sorry, these boxes of original artwork, and I happened to find one of these 7 um,
Hmm.
of it, and so I got to find out what happened to the other ones was that they were being processed, and a lot of that artwork went back. And stories about artwork being destroyed and stuff like that had happened.
Right.
Um, I could not get a confirmation in the sense of who actually saw it happen because you get tons of rumors.
Right.
Was a warehouse that got broken into, stuff was taken, and yeah, stuff left the office. But the way they left the office was because at the time, and I'm talking about through the whole career of Marvel, going back to the Silver Age and stuff like that, they were giving out the artwork because no one wanted the artwork.
Hmm.
Either everybody who came in from advertising and the artwork belonged to the company, you gave the artwork in, what they
Right.
printed material. The company itself had no value to the artwork because the company itself wanted the printed item. That's what the
Hmm.
important stuff was. So it wasn't until years later that someone's like, I would like to buy that. And people were like, oh, well, we don't have it. Now, once value came to it, then
Right.
people wanted them. And rightfully so, that the artist should have got all this artwork back.
Hmm.
So during my time in there, I tried the best I could to make sure I got artwork back. And I found stuff, like I said, going back to that time period, I found tons of stuff that I wish I had more time to really sit there and continue to go through it all because there was just tons and tons of stuff. And because it was an entry level job, I didn't get that much help. I had interns,
Mm.
and I had probably more interns than a lot of people because I would have to train them all and
Right.
make sure that they understood what needed to be done. And so now I had interns in the art returns department. I had interns in the library running that, and
Mm.
and I had some great interns. And you remember the interns' names of the people who were the best, or sometimes
Right.
worse.
Yeah.
And and I would hope that my legacy in comics is these interns that got to work for me because
Mm.
some went ahead and got into comics. And um, the thing is like my first intern, George Muriel, he was already there, so he kind of taught me stuff because he was in
Mm.
the girl before me. So we went through some stuff and how to do things. And eventually, I left that job on the weekend job at the toy store,
Mm.
had him hired to go work there. And so it's like in the sense of sending him out into the world. And then I got to interview my own set of interns, and they came into the regular internship department rather than the way I got in there.
Mm.
And um, and so one of the coolest things that I had got to interview with is Brian Smith. He eventually was hired to become a assistant editor at Marvel, and then became an editor, and then he moved on to Nickelodeon, and now he publishes his own comics. He's really big in the indie scene of
Mm.
stuff, and it's like, yeah, he was a part of that. And because he went to FIT, he brought his friends to interview with me, and they were all kind of cut from the same cloth. So it was like I was getting the same intern at the same time, so to speak. So Brian Smith brought me Darren Douglas, and so Darren was one of the one of the best interns I ever had because not only was he, I mean, they were all artists because they all went to FIT. He
Right.
was so gun ho about comics, and
Mm.
while we're working, we just talk about comics, the art of comics, and what to do. And he took some of my characters and he redrew them. And again, he's a person that I kept in touch with and is done work for me in Section 8. He's one of those people that was there from the beginning, one of the first artists other than me to draw my characters. And he would talk about, oh, you could change this, you could fix that, and stuff like that. So be the back and forth that we would get. And then he brought in a guy named, nickname is Nakash. We all call him
Mm.
Nakash, Finley. And Finley was like basically another replacement. He's an artist at FIT. And for a good year, I had some of the best interns because I had these guys who were only a few years younger than me. So they were college interns because I just could not handle the high school interns. They
Mm.
just wasn't fully sentient yet to be able to work. And
Right.
so the college interns had at least this type of wanting to be there because they all wanted to be part of Marvel.
Mm.
And so for those, and again, here are interns that I had that became lifelong friendships that, I practically call them my brothers because no matter what, they were always there for me. I went to their weddings, just kept in touch with them and working with them at, having them being able to do stuff with me with Section 8 years later. And even another intern, Chris Allo, who would eventually replace me in art returns. It was the guy that I got to hire because at
Mm.
the point when we moved to Marvel offices from 387 to I think it was 50th Street, I had a bigger office because they combined the art returns department and the library together. And the office was big enough to bring in another department, which was what was called the Marvel Dam, which is the digital archives.
Mm.
So that was part of my office, but there was another person who ran that for a little while. And and again, what all this is going on within that 10-year span of me working on Team Kaiju, trying to do stuff with Committed, stuff with Committed kind of died down. And okay, what am I going to do with the book? Well, everything got put to the side, so to speak.
Right.
And uh, I was more concentrating on the Marvel stuff. Had a bunch of great interns that I still have contact with. And then the person who was doing the Marvel Dam, that partition in the department, he got fired. And it wasn't that, oh, would you mind doing this now too? It was like it was an opening that I could actually apply for.
Oh, okay.
I became the digital archivist at Marvel,
Mm.
overseeing art returns and overseeing the library. So art
Mm.
returns, so Chris Atlow became the art returns guy that I hired, who was an intern of mine in the past. So brought it in, and he eventually, even after I was gone from Marvel, he eventually became. I'm forgetting all these terms. The new talent coordinator. So
Okay.
to rise up through the ranks at Marvel
Mm.
that way, and it was amazing because again, I think those are my legacies for Marvel. It's going to be the interns that basically went on and continued to work in the comic industry. So all these things are going on and happening. Me trying to find all the artwork. Marvel eventually buying Malibu, so all that artwork came to me,
Oof.
and there was tons of artwork that became a problem because the Malibu contracts were different than the Marvel contracts,
Mm.
or Marvel lack of contracts. With Marvel, the original artwork, you get a 22-page book. It gets broken up to 14 pages to the inker. Sorry, 14 pages to the pencil, 8 pages to the inker. It is a blind draw, so you don't know who's getting what pages. And I knew I was doing the job right when both the penciler and the inker were upset with their pages, because I had conversations where the penciler would call and say, "Oh, you gave all the good pages to the inker." The inker would call that afternoon, "You gave all the good pages to the penciler," and it's like either you each had pages in mind, call each other and trade them off, or
Mm.
maybe the pages weren't really all that good to begin with. But so,
Right.
you get to work with a lot of people, a lot of characters, a lot of egos, and
Mm.
I dealt with a lot of the art reps. In order for you to get artwork back from Marvel at the time, you had to sign what was called an artwork release form.
Okay.
And the artwork release form basically states that the characters and the artwork is copyrighted Marvel and all that stuff. Do not,
Mm.
basically repurpose the pages to print your own books and stuff like that. It's all legal
Right.
to protect the artist, protect Marvel. And so you had to sign the form to get your artwork back. And
Mm.
artists will have the artwork go directly to their art reps and things like that. So I got to meet to talk to all the art reps, and again, these guys are doing their job, trying to make sure they get the best pages. So you would get calls like, "Oh, this is the triple page splash. That should go to the penciler." And it's like, "But no, this draw is the inker," and that's just the way it is. So there was a lot of tension with
Mm.
them going, "Well, we would like to do this," because they're trying to sell the pages, and I can understand that. But at the same time, it's like, if this is supposed to go to the inker, it's going to the inker.
Right.
Simple. Unless there was some kind of a thing beforehand, and the inker agreed and stuff like that. So again, being at that job, I got to meet every single artist that ever worked for Marvel, and I became good friends with the DC art returns guy because
Mm.
it's a small industry. So people who leave Marvel, they usually go to DC. And if I have artwork that needs to go to someone and we don't have the proper address, I would just basically be able to call the DC guy and go, "Hey, I need the address to this following person." So it was like it was like spies, and we're doing backdoor stuff because it was just quicker for me to call them than to
Mm.
do like an official channels type stuff. And not an official channels ever actually existed. It was just one of those things that we would call up. And it is funny because there was things like once I was there long enough that it's like, I haven't received a raise. Can I get a raise? And I was told, "Well, here's the thing. You have an entry level job, and that only has a salary cap to this much. And I think," and they even came up with like, "You're the highest paid art returns guy in the industry." And it's like, "Oh." So how can you say stuff like that? And it's like,
Mm.
you're telling me this, but we just put out Spider-Man that made $4 billion, and you're telling me there's no money? So
Mm.
towards the end, things were starting to get miserable. And for me, I was a lifer. I thought I was just going to work there and retire from there.
Mm.
I was getting freelance work at Marvel, but towards the end, I was actually offered lettering work. And it's like, well,
Okay.
I don't know how to letter, but I'll take the job first and then I'll learn.
Mm.
And it's basically been some parts of my career where it's like, as a freelancer, you say yes to the job, and then
Mm-hmm.
so my first real lettering work was for a small company called CPM, Central.
Central Park Media.
So I told you about Marvel's firing and stuff like that. A lot of
Mm.
editors were fired. One of the editors was Mike Lack. And I met up with Mike at a bar because, again, during conventions, everyone goes to the parties. They go to the bar. Met up with Mike, and he was like, "Oh, what are you doing these days?" And it's like, "Well, I'm still at Marvel, but I'm branching out to do freelance work when I can." And it's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And it's like, and at the time, because I was doing stuff for Committed, I was basically doing. I wasn't working on comics directly. I was doing production work. So I was
Right.
putting books together for print. And so it's like, oh, we could use someone to do that, but it'll be lettering. And so we
Mm.
flipped the artwork. And so it's production stuff that I could do on the weekends. So why not? So
Can I ask you a question? What books were you? What books do you remember lettering over there? Because I worked at Central Park Media as a
uh,
writer.
I did a lot of mangas that I will admit to doing Alien 9.
Uh huh.
It was a nice, cute book.
So you mean you didn't do a Roscoe Doji?
I don't know what that term is. I did a lot of hentai. And here's the funny thing about hentai books, if people don't know what they are. They're manga books that are missing the goodies because the Japanese do not draw those in or they get blocked out. So
Right.
one of my early jobs in working with a non-Marvel thing was drawing in the goodies. And
Nice.
you cannot put that on your resume, draw dicks well. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was like some of the things that we did. And by we,
Mm-hmm.
like my production department at the time, which was me and my brother Lawrence, which I believe you met. So we basically, and back then we had to take the mangas, the Japanese mangas, cut them, scan them in,
Mm.
remove
Wow.
the lettering, remove the original Japanese text,
Mm.
flip it, and put it in. And man, that paid so well that was able to buy my computer, my brother's computer, and basically set up my whole office. So
Wow.
printer,
So,
mhm,
so let
printer,
me ask.
scanner. Uh-huh.
So they didn't even send you chromes. They didn't send you like film. You just were working straight.
Not yet. They would give me the original Tokopons. I think they were
Uh,
called.
yeah.
They sound like a Pokemon name, but so they would give me the original Japanese manga, and
Mm.
I find out till years later you could also put them in the microwave, and it would heat up
The
the
glue.
glue, and then you could pull out the pages easy. But
Mm.
then they would X-Acto knife cutting these 300-page books, scanning in all 300 pages, and doing that for a while before I eventually got before they started giving me discs. And then,
Mm.
so even though Mike hired me, I was working for Frank Panone,
Mm.
and um, and that kind of like brought me into doing work for I don't think I would call Central Park Media small press, but it was like it was the outskirts of the generic comic book stuff that was going on.
Yeah,
So
I
Marvel,
think in today's terms, like
uh-huh.
if we did a comparative, they'd probably be somewhere along the lines of Oni.
Yes, very much.
Right.
So
Mm.
they were working in manga. Marvel wasn't making mangas, so I didn't see a problem freelance
Mm.
for them. Plus, I
Right.
wasn't a freelancer for Marvel. I was a colorist for Marvel, not a letterer. So those were the workaround type of things. Um, so that's I was dipping my toe into basically going freelance.
Mm.
So making connections that way. And so eventually I was asked to leave Marvel. Basically, I and maybe a handful of other people were let go. Uh, since I was more worried about the art returns department, it's like, oh, are you going to go with Chris too? And it's like, no. It's like, oh, okay. So it was just, the lateral move that I made from doing art returns to doing the digital archives. And I thought I was doing a really good job at the digital archives because, again, fixing a few things that were wrong with it. But I butted heads with a few people upstairs because they were asking for things to be done that I wouldn't do because it didn't make any sense. So one of the things was that, yes, I control the library. As I mentioned before, we talked about the comps, which were the books that were given out. So I was giving out the comps because, again, would you mind doing this kind of a thing? Because they had fired so many people from the mailroom. The mailroom department didn't have time to be able to put the comps together. So I figured out a way to get the comps done and distribute to everybody.
Okay.
Once they took that away from me, I started seeing the writing on the wall. Oh, now they're taking things away, but I still didn't think anything was going to happen. So because I controlled the library, we had so many of these comp books all over the place that people upstairs wanted a count of how many books were there.
Okay.
Reason why. And I was like, fine. So me and the slew of interns spent a couple of weeks counting every book to let them know. And every week I would have to email them a count of the new books that came in. But again, not told why this was going on.
Right.
It's like, I don't mind doing hard work. I don't care if you need me to do hard work. I'll do the hard work. But kind of tell me what's going on because I might know a way to do it and streamline it a little better if you told me what you were doing it for. And they were really good of not telling me these types of things. And I even talked to one of my bosses at the time. And being one of my bosses is that I went through about 3 or 4 bosses during my course there because, again, once Holly, who ran the department, who hired me, once she was getting ready to leave, or before she left, there was someone else that came in and kind of inherited me, almost in a way, took me from her because she ran art returns at DC. So it was Bob Greenberg, and great guy. We got along really well, and he wanted to do a lot of things, do more things there. And because I had access to all this artwork and all this old artwork, it was like, why am I not scanning this artwork in? Like it exists, the original art exists, and maybe a comic book, but a lot of this stuff was not being printed.
Right.
Get me a computer and a scanner. And it was pulling teeth to get a computer, and they wouldn't get a scanner. So all this artwork that could have been archived and been made into like a lot of these books that they're now trying to print, oversized original art books. They're pulling calls out to collectors. Would you mind giving us your art back so we could scan it in? A lot of this stuff could have been scanned in back then. But again, we're dealing with the people. And when I say people upstairs, it's just the 11th and 12th floor that weren't editorial, weren't people who was there to really make a difference in comics. They were there to pad their resume saying that they worked for Marvel and they're going to be gone in a year. And most of them were.
So bean counters?
Huh?
The bean counters?
The bean counters, the people who wanted their names in the books that had no reason to have their names in the books, but just wanted to be, again, was there to be part of Marvel, but was biding their times to run away. The people that basically brought down Marvel eventually in those types of things, or so the legend goes. So I would have these archive discs from the printers. And it was like the separators would send us the original discs that were burned onto CDs, and I had a wall full of these, and I was told, well, we're now archiving everything, you could get rid of them. And it's like, I understand that, but we don't have everything archived, because there's not a week that went by that I would be asked for something and it wouldn't be in the archives, it would be on the discs.
Right.
So, but they were adamant to toss these things out, and it's like, but your office is not in your way. And so I would say, you know what? Okay, I'll take care of it. And sure enough, they never came back to look, so that stuff was still there. So, and then as I told you, I was writing those reports of how many books were sitting there every week. 1 week I missed, I wrote the email and I didn't send it out, and nothing happened. Another week went out, and nothing happened. So I just stopped sending that report in because, and as I feared, no one was reading them. So it was like, you're giving me extra work to do when I can actually be doing my work. So getting back to the Malibu stuff, because they wouldn't let me break up the artwork the Marvel way, it stood in the drawers. And as far as I'm aware of, they're in those drawers to this day. And I know a lot of Malibu artists would like that artwork back. But, you know, again, it's somewhere. Last I heard, it was shipped off to a warehouse. So who knows where? So then I get my walking papers from Marvel, and basically, okay, now what do I do? Because at that time, I had no intentions of leaving. I was getting enough freelance work from Marvel and then the lettering work that it's like, well, then I'm just going to stick to the lettering work. But of course, Central Park Media didn't last too long. The editor I had at Central Park Media, Frank Pinot, went off to Media Blasters. So I got to continue doing manga for them. Steve Pakula, who worked at Central Park Media, went off and disappeared until I run into him at a convention, and he's working for Topps.
Nice.
So now I'm freelancing at this point, doing manga, doing coloring, and now doing sketch cards for Topps. And again, this is like 10 years after I was doing sketch cards for Marvel, because remember when I mentioned they bought Fleer. So Fleer was doing the sketchograph cards. It was the first sketch cards ever made, and I was on those first sets. It paid crap, and we hundreds and hundreds of cards that I never scanned them in. We have maybe 12 cards from that collection that I have scans of, and I look back at them, and they're the most hideous cards. But again, I wasn't a penciler, but I was drawing it because they wanted everyone to be working on these cards.
Hey, look, there's some guy out there, some little kid out there that loves those cards.
Yeah,
so don't put them down.
I don't. I eventually found one on eBay that sold for $300.
Oh, there you go.
My God, people are paying this much for my art. That's wonderful. That's a good boost. So leaving Marvel, you know, it was a kick in the ass that I needed to try to go, okay, I'm going to do freelance. And you know what? Maybe I should revisit doing my books, doing Team Kaiju. That was sitting there for a while, sitting there for basically at that point 10 years. Then 24-Hour Comics came out. For those who don't know, 24-Hour Comics is to completely do a comic book in 24 hours. And so the Dragon's Den in Westchester was hosting a night to do that.
Cool. And
Alex from Committed Comics was like, hey, do you want to try to do this? And Eric was like, yeah, let's go. Eric came to like basically give me support, and I was going to sit there and draw. And basically sat down. The rules to 24-Hour Comics is you have to start at whatever time you start, work for 24 hours. You do not pre anything. You know, you basically get your tools and stuff like that. But story is brand new, characters brand new, whatever you want to do is there. So on my way, I did think, you know, I'll probably do a ninja because it doesn't have to make any noise. So I don't have to worry about writing anything, lettering anything. And basically sat down and started a comic book that was going to be about this ninja monkey on an island. I spent the first hour designing the monkey to then go, I'm not doing a monkey. It was too hard to draw. I'm going to do a mouse instead. And so I do a mouse on an island because, again, we're using every trick that I learned that if you draw an island, it's a horizon line, some rocks, a palm tree, and you're done with the background. And then just drawing water. Cartoony style was just easy for me to draw. I was doing light pencils and going straight to inks. And basically did a story about a mouse, a ninja mouse training on an island that had, he would get notes from a master that you never see because the notes would come flying in with a dart or something something like that. And the only text was like, what are you training on? And it was just a gag. It was basically he would do this and how it would mess up. He would do that, how it would mess up. He's trying to meditate and a fly comes in and he cuts the fly's wings off. And the story evolved from there. Then I started doing splash pages because they were quicker to draw. And so at the 24-hour mark, I am done and did not complete it because I thought I was like 8 pages away. But I did it all night long and I was exhausted. It was a wonderful time because there were other people in the comic book shop doing stuff too. During the time the shop was open, people were coming in and talking, and it was funny because you had a guy coming in and, oh, you should do this and you should do that, and I was like, you should sit down and draw it yourself if you think it's that easy. And you know, that's 24 hours. You want to deal with people, and so we did it. It was done, and got home, took a nap, got up, and finished the last 8 pages because it was like still needs to get done. And then I put that into a drawer for a couple of years. So because that happened, and I'm freelancing, Eric and Alex is like, you know, you guys want to try to do something? You know, maybe not a committed thing, just something else. And it was like, well, you know, we have Ninja Mouse sitting there doing absolutely nothing. Maybe we should at least print that just for the hell of it. And so I started putting the book together, and it was like, all right, we'll make a black and white copy, and that will be technically the first Section 8 comics book that we published ourselves. We found some printers somewhere that did it in black and white for us, and because we were able to get a super homie discount, it cost that much. I don't know what those guys are doing nowadays, but
now did you go digital or was this like offset?
This is offset. It was you know, it was you who printed it for me. So
that's right. I was doing that back then.
That's what you were doing back then.
That's right.
It wasn't, the concept wasn't really to make a comic book company. It was it was basically to get me more work. It was like, here's the proof for me being able to print this book in black and white that we could use our connections with you basically to make black and white books for other artists. And we did a few of them. I did a few for Committed. Did a few for artists who wanted to print their own sketchbook for cons. Because the artists knew how to put the art together but couldn't do the digital stuff. So I was putting together books for people, sending them to you to get printed.
Right.
And eventually that kind of started my new career in publishing that wasn't indie publishing, but it was. It was indie in the sense of for other people. And I was happy doing that. To use your own term, it's like I was going to get rich from selling the people the pans that they need to gold mine. Let them do the hard work. But I would put together these books, and I put together so many books for people that kind of became a business of a production art. I became a freelance production guy. So I was designing banners for people, sending them off to printers, various printers, you know, you being one of them for the black and white stuff. That eventually led to doing color stuff. But in the back of my head was always that, you know, why not do our own stuff? Let's do your mouse in color. And it's like, okay, it was very easy to color because it's, you know, a cartoony book. And Ninja Mouse basically became that first colored Section 8 comic book that, like, it was easy. I hate to use the term easy, but it was easy to publish compared to what it was a few years before. Comics are difficult, but they're not as difficult to publish as they were. Right. As you know, we would have to print, you know, the minimum 5,000 books.
If you went through Brenner, it was 3, but yeah, it was still very high. It was a large amount of books.
A lot.
And, and you ended up sleeping on them.
Yeah,
literally.
You would be sitting on books.
Yep.
And if you didn't have a distributor, which we didn't, you know, we would sell it only at cons, and you have a lot of books, and those damn things are heavy. But again, so I'm out of Marvel, and looking at maybe this independent publishing thing is the way to go.
Right.
Have enough friends, enough connections to try to do something.
Mm.
At the same time, being full freelance, there's no money. So whatever work I was doing, I would be able to put it into the books. And basically that's pretty much the birth of Section 8 Comics, with missing so many things in between because we're talking about 10 years of 10 or more years of stuff going on.
Well, we're gonna have to revisit that maybe a little bit later. We'll have to come back to that because we're running almost on 2 hours, so this is a little bit longer than my usual thing here.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Like I said, we'll come back to this because I know you're working on something new with Ninja Mouse, right? So I know.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about that for a couple of minutes, go ahead.
Okay. So with Section 8, we publish a number of title of books, and we would sell them at cons. Our books are on Comixology, and we print a few books. And then now that we're all at home, basically trying to work on stuff. I've been lucky that I'm still working freelance lettering for a bunch of publishers that I haven't actually had off time. So I am able to revisit some stuff. And talking to Eric, we decided, hey, let's work on a second issue of Ninja Mouse. Originally, it was just going to be a one-shot book because it was a 24-hour thing. And it's like, why not do that again? Let's do a second issue of Ninja Mouse and put that out because, it's we still sell that book well to this day. Kids tend to like it. Why not do a series? And Eric has written up a story that I think works pretty well. I think he's very excited about it because he gets to actually write Ninja Mouse. The first issue I did. So now it takes the burden off of me of writing the story because he's coming up with the whole story. So it's like I get to sit there and create brand new characters for it. We still revisit Ninja Mouse, and it's something that I'm really enjoying doing. And that's something that I'm looking forward to doing, to working, or I'm looking forward to finishing because a lot of it's done. And it's basically, this is the official announcement that Ninja Mouse #2 is in the works. And we have some of the other Section 8 titles. We have a title called Section 8 Comics Presents, which all of our books have been one-shot books. Done kind of a thing. We want to tell a story. We think of them as movies. They're like 48 pages. Here's the whole story. If you like it, if it's popular, we may continue it. And Section 8 Comics Presents is that continuation of some of these stories.
Gotcha.
And going back to revisit Team Kaiju, which we did put out, is the one issue that's out, that's published, that's available both in digital and print. And that's going to be a 6-issue miniseries. So issue 2, I'm in the middle of it. Issue 3 and 4 are actually done because I had other artists do it. And basically, once I have 2 in bed, then I'll feel comfortable putting 2, 3, and 4 out because then all we have to worry about is 5 and 6. So that's what we're working on in the downtime that I kind of don't have, but we do have.
Gotcha. Cool. Now we're gonna move into this section where I ask you all these weird questions. So let me start with one. You've already kind of answered this. I mean, you've been collecting artwork from various artists over the years. But if you had a choice of an artist, unlimited budget, don't worry about that, and you you can grab any artist from any time, any era, living or dead. What would be the artist you want to pick to do a cover for you?
To do a cover for me. There are so many artists, and I've been lucky that I had a few already do it. But I guess let me pick a book. If I was to have an artist do Team Kaiju, anyone to do it, Bernie Wrightson.
Okay.
Because, like I said, he was the first artist whose artwork I looked at, and that I recognized that art style. And he was such a nice guy. I met him a few times at cons because, again, it's one big con. Everyone's a family type of thing. And it's funny that I'm picking him because as I sit here and think about it, it's like, no, you want Art Adams to do a Kaiju cover because he's a Kaiju artist. But to have Bernie Wrightson, that would have been something.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Now my next question is, if you got the golden ticket to go back to Marvel or DC or any of these companies, and they said, Wilson, here's your shot. Pick a book, whatever book you want. You can do whatever you want. You can write it, draw it, pick your writer, whatever. If you want to bring Eric on as your writer, what would be the book you'd want to do?
It wouldn't be a book. I would want
Mm-hmm.
to do a line of books. I would like to do a line of books that they're both missing. Marvel
Mm-hmm.
and DC are missing. I would not necessarily bring back Star Comics, but I would
Mm-hmm.
bring back the concept of those types of books, children's books type of thing. The industry is lacking Harvey comics.
Right.
I think they're lacking the introductory books for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Line that is something that could get them into the shops to read, something that will get them there. I feel that the industry missed a portion of sales by not using the craze of the Pokemon cards to their advantage. You have
Mm-hmm.
kids going to comic book shops, buying cards and putting them into sleeves. What does that sound like? Their
Mm-hmm.
collector mentality was there. So why not create? And I was working at Marvel at the time. Why not create a line of books like Spider-Ham, which
Right.
we're doing now? When I got
Mm-hmm.
the idea, it's like no one wants to read Spider-Ham. Even
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm sometimes 5 years ahead of the industry on my crazy ideas because I would be pitching at Marvel almost every week something and saying, "No, you can't do that. We can't do that. That can't be done." And
Mm-hmm.
sure enough, 5, 10 years later, all those things are now being done. And it's like, oh, we could have capitalized on it back then. So for me, my golden ticket thing is probably to make a children's line of books in the vein of Harvey Comics, Star Comics, and Marvel and DC. Almost mostly the older companies like that have a line of those books sitting there that haven't been used. I like
Gotcha.
that art style. I like that clean pop art
Mm-hmm.
style of those comic books, like the Disney type books. The Star line is probably the closest thing that I would say, or the Rich Casper and stuff like that. Those
Mm-hmm.
those books are around. There is a publisher doing some of those things, but
Yeah.
there's so many IPs that are sitting there not being done correctly. And there's some other ones that it's like I wouldn't save them because I think I want to do some stuff with them beforehand
Mm-hmm.
and just publish some covers to go. This is what I would do with these properties. But
Gotcha.
you know,
All right. Well, that's cool. That's cool. Now I got a few comparative questions,
okay.
so we'll see. We'll see how these work out. All right. I'll give you an easy one. This is a softball one. Godzilla or Gamera?
I love Godzilla, but I'm going to say Gamera because he doesn't get enough press.
Okay.
Godzilla, Godzilla is now in his heyday, so I was.
Mhm. Okay. Kirby or Ditko?
I dislike both of them when I started reading comics.
But as you mature.
As I mature, I could appreciate what they've both done. Um, I'm leaning towards Ditko just because Spider-Man.
Gotcha. Okay. That sounds cool. That sounds cool. Um, Let me see. Eisner or Toth?
Oh, damn, man. Oh, it hurt. Tough.
Hmm.
Alex.
Oh, yeah, okay. Cool, cool. Lord of the Rings or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Okay. So that was easy. That was the easy one. Pinhead or Freddy Krueger?
Freddy Krueger. I have more of a connection with him because I saw all those movies more so than Pinhead. I didn't understand those movies.
Got you. Well, yeah, Clive Barker's a little weird, so you know. Here, I'll hit you. I hit you with another. I'm gonna give you two more, and we'll start with this one. George Perez or John Byrne?
Damn. There's just. I'm going to. I'm going to say George Perez.
Okay.
I'm going to say George Perez. My mind is screaming John Byrne, but no, it's George.
Gotcha. No, no. I mean, listen. That's the funny thing about this little game. There are no wrong. There are no wrong, and there are no right answers. It's just.
Because I even try to think, whose artwork do you own? I own a piece of art from both of them.
Oh, well, there you go.
And neither of them has ever drawn a Team Kaiju sketch.
Okay, so we'll end with this one. All right, Hellboy or Usagi Yojimbo?
I've read. I highly respect Yojimbo completely, but I never read any of his stories. I own plenty of his books, but I've never sat down and read. I've even drawn his character for the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund sketch cards. But I know so much more of Hellboy. I have to lean towards Hellboy.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. So there we are, Wilson. Thank you so much. Like I said, this one went a little long, but it was well worth it, man. I mean, like the stories you have from Marvel, this is incredible because it's a lot of information that we hear stuff from writers, but we never hear that particular perspective from the market.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like one of the big eye openers that I got by working Marvels is that you can work in comics and not necessarily be on the comic books themselves.
Right.
The people at Marvel itself were such a wonderful group of people. People that basically, in lack of a better term, become your family. My time at Marvel was one of the best times I ever had. And sure, near the end, it just became miserable that I had to go. But the people that were there during the time I was there were no longer there anyway. So, yes, I did leave a lot of good friends there. And I made so many friends. And I made so many more friends afterwards that there's still a special place in my heart for Marvel. I'm amazed about the things that they're doing. The fact that Disney has been able to let them stay their own thing. And I can't complain about that. The few reasons that I would still wish that I was there was because of the people that were there. The getting the free comic books was a nice bonus. And I'm a little peeved that now as Disney employees, they get pins every year for every year they're there. It's like, wow. I'd like to have gotten something like that. But again, it was the stepping block to do my own thing. That and again, we'll maybe do a part 2 someday, so that we get to the Indy part of it. That it was the stepping stone that I needed. I needed to learn comics from there. Because everything I learned in college about art had nothing to do about the type of art that's comic books. And so I had to relearn how to draw all together and to do comics. And I developed a cartoony style. So that's why I'm not doing superhero stuff, because it's not in my bank to be able to do. That's why I lean towards more doing the lettering and coloring and inking of the superhero stuff. But the penciling is so hard for me to do that I'm only doing it on the Team Kaiju stuff. I rather draw the Ninja Mouse stuff because of the more cartoony nature. I guess if I wasn't doing comic books, I probably would have been doing animation, or like I said, graphic design, which is what I was true for. So to be able to take that and step in to do independent stuff, especially now that there is so much that we could learn, I would have killed to be able to have like YouTube channels to learn how to do certain things. And like I mentioned before, it's like we could publish comic books without even the cost of printing right now by doing it digital. I'm not saying it's full digital. I'm just saying that there is a platform that people are buying books that are digital. There's a platform where people are buying books in print. Put your books on both platforms. Put your books on every platform that's available. Because even though our books are on Comixology, you can find our books on some other digital platforms. We advertise Comixology because they're the biggest one. So, but you could find our books on other platforms, or, you could even find it in print. And if you go to our website, section8comics.com or the8spot.com, right there's an area where you can get our books. Basically, it'll link you to either Comixology to get it in digital, or to Comic Monkey, I believe it's called. that does it in print. So you have best of both worlds. But if you go to Comixology for Team Kaiju, you could get it there for 99 cents.
Gotcha.
If print, it's going to be $4.99. So I'm just letting you know, because of viewers of this channel can get it for 99 cents, and that's the price Comixology eventually did.
And all of those links will be in the show notes. And that's it, Wilson. We're all tied up. Do you have any other websites or any place else they can reach you on social media?
They can reach me on Instagram at aspot.com. You can follow us on Instagram there. You can follow me on Ramos Kaiju. Almost all my Twitter, Instagram, Facebook is Ramos Kaiju. So you can either find me there or at the 8 Spot is where. And Team Kaiju also has its own Instagram page now. I just started. And anywhere else, basically a lot of independent publishers like Apex Comics I do work for, Storm Comics I do work for, Paper Cut Books. There's a ton of people that I do freelance work for. So, again, I usually say that I'm a freelance artist who happens to do indie books as well.
Gotcha. So we're gonna have to do this again someday. Hopefully not too long in the future, because I know you got stuff coming up, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, I'll definitely let you know.
Yep, definitely let me know. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll be talking to you soon. See you soon. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and I'll be talking to you all later. Have a good night.
Yeah, take care.